He wanted a quiet wife, a gentle woman to help him forget the blood on his hands. Instead, he got Eleanor, a widow running from a secret that could destroy them both. What Jackson Wade did not know was that the woman standing before him in that mourning dress was married to the very outlaw he had hunted down 3 years ago, the same man whose capture still haunted his nightmares. And now that dead man's brother was coming, with 8 gunmen, and a thirst for revenge that no amount of money could satisfy. This is a story of 2 broken people who found each other in the harshest winter Montana had ever seen. A bounty hunter trying to outrun his past, a widow trying to survive her future, and a love that neither of them expected. This story reminds us that redemption is not found in running from our past, but in facing it with someone who sees our scars and chooses to stay anyway. Sometimes the person we need is not the one we asked for. Sometimes love shows up wearing a mask of complications. And sometimes the wildest hearts make the most loyal partners. If you believe that broken people deserve second chances, drop a comment below telling me what part of Jackson and Eleanor's journey touched you most. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another Wild West love story. Now settle in. Pour yourself some coffee. And let me take you back to Montana Territory, 1886, where the snow fell thick, the danger ran deep, and love was the last thing anyone expected to find. The dead cow stared up at Jackson Wade with frozen eyes that held no accusation, just emptiness. The same emptiness he felt every morning when he woke from the nightmares. He drove the shovel into the frozen ground. His breath came out in white clouds that hung in the still air before vanishing. Montana Territory had turned cruel this winter of 1886. The old-timers called it the worst they had ever seen. Jackson called it fitting punishment for a man like him. 11 men dead by his hand, 11 graves scattered across 4 territories, and 1 woman, always the woman. He pushed the memory down and kept digging. The earth fought back with every strike, frozen solid 3 feet deep. By the time he finished burying the cow, the sun would be setting, and his hands would be raw and bleeding through his worn gloves. Silent Tom appeared on the ridge leading 2 horses. The old crow man made a series of quick gestures with his hands. His dark eyes held urgency. Jackson straightened up and wiped the sweat from his forehead despite the bitter cold. He had learned to read Tom's signs years ago when he first came to this land seeking peace, seeking forgiveness that would never come. The signs said one word: letter. Jackson drove the shovel into the ground and left it standing like a grave marker. The cow could wait. Letters meant news from town, news from Ruth Blackwood at the boarding house, news about his mail-order bride. He mounted his horse Caesar and followed Tom back toward the ranch house. The building sat against a backdrop of white mountains and gray sky. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, a modest home for a modest dream. All he wanted was quiet, a wife who would cook and clean and maybe give him children who would grow up without knowing what their father had been. A quiet wife. That was what he had asked for in the advertisement. Someone gentle and soft-spoken, someone who could help him forget the blood on his hands. Tom handed him the letter when they reached the porch. The paper was worn from traveling, and stained with something that might have been coffee, or might have been whiskey. Ruth's handwriting sprawled across the front in her distinctive style. Jackson tore it open and read, "Your bride arrived on the afternoon stage. She is waiting at my establishment. I must warn you, Jackson. She is not what you described wanting. Come quickly before the next storm hits. And bring extra blankets. The girl looks half-starved." Ruth Blackwood Jackson read the letter twice. His jaw tightened. Not what you described wanting. What the hell did that mean? He looked at Tom, who stood waiting with patient eyes. The old man had worked for Jackson for 3 years now. He had never asked questions about Jackson's past. Never seemed to care that his employer had once been the most feared bounty hunter west of the Mississippi. Tom had his own scars. The jagged line across his throat where someone had cut out his tongue spoke of horrors Jackson could only imagine. "Saddle the wagon," Jackson said. "We ride to Silver Creek today." Tom nodded and moved toward the barn with the quiet efficiency that defined everything he did. Jackson went inside to gather supplies. The cabin was sparse but functional. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with an iron stove, a bedroom through a wooden door that he had built himself when he first arrived in Montana. The bed was large enough for two, but had only ever held one. That would change today. For better or worse, he was about to become a married man. He packed blankets and dried meat and a bottle of whiskey for the road. The ride to Silver Creek would take 4 hours in good weather. In this weather, it might take 6 or more. And if another storm hit while they were traveling, they would need supplies to survive. Jackson caught his reflection in the window glass as he passed. The scar on his face ran from his left temple down to his jaw. A knife fight in Tombstone 6 years ago. The man who gave it to him was buried in Potter's Field with a bullet in his heart. What would his bride think when she saw that scar? What would she think when she looked into his eyes and saw the ghost that lived there? It did not matter. This was a business arrangement. She needed a husband and a home. He needed someone to remind him that he was still capable of building rather than destroying. Love was not part of the bargain. Love was for people who deserved it. The ride to Silver Creek took 7 hours. The storm hit when they were still 2 miles out. Wind screamed across the open prairie and snow fell so thick that Jackson could barely see Caesar's ears in front of him. He and Tom tied a rope between their horses so they would not lose each other in the white chaos. They made it to town just as the last light faded from the sky. Silver Creek huddled against the mountains like a child hiding from a monster. Wooden buildings lined the main street. The saloon glowed warm and yellow. The general store had closed for the night, and at the end of the street, Ruth Blackwood's boarding house stood 3 stories tall with smoke pouring from every chimney. Jackson dismounted and handed Caesar's reins to Tom. "See to the horses," he said. "I will find you inside." Tom nodded and led both animals toward the stable behind the building. Jackson climbed the porch steps and pushed through the front door. Warmth hit him like a physical force. The smell of cooking meat and burning wood and something floral that he could not identify. The main room held several armchairs arranged before a fireplace. A staircase led up to the guest rooms. And behind a wooden counter stood Ruth Blackwood herself. She was 55 years old with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen everything and judged none of it. She had been a working girl in her youth. Now she was the most respected woman in Silver Creek. People came to her for advice and comfort and the best biscuits in the territory. "Jackson," she said, "you look half frozen." "Where is she?" Jackson asked. Ruth's expression shifted. Something like concern crossed her weathered face. "Upstairs, room 3. But Jackson, wait. He was already moving toward the stairs. "She is not what you expected," Ruth called after him. "Go gentle with her. The girl is scared of her own shadow." Jackson paused with his hand on the railing. "Scared of what?" Ruth shook her head. "I do not know." "But she arrived in morning clothes, black dress, black bonnet. And she has not eaten a full meal in days from the look of her. Whatever brought her here, it was not adventure." Jackson absorbed this information. Morning clothes meant she had lost someone recently. A parent, perhaps, or a husband. A husband. The thought struck him like a blow to the chest. The advertisement had specified unmarried women only. If she was a widow, she had lied to him. And if she had lied about that, what else was she hiding? He climbed the stairs slowly. His boots made no sound on the worn carpet. Years of tracking men through wilderness had taught him to move like a ghost. The skill had served him well when his targets tried to run. Now it felt like a violation, sneaking up on a woman who was to be his wife. Room 3 sat at the end of the hall. A thin line of light showed beneath the door. She was awake. Jackson raised his hand to knock, then stopped. From inside the room came a sound that made his blood run cold. A woman crying. Not the gentle weeping of grief, but the ragged, desperate sobs of someone who had reached the end of their endurance. And through those sobs, he heard a name. Daniel. She was calling for someone named Daniel. crying for him in the dark. Jackson's hand fell to his side. His heart hammered against his ribs. Daniel. Why did that name sound familiar? Why did it make the hairs on the back of his neck stand up? He forced himself to knock. The crying stopped instantly. A moment of silence. Then footsteps approaching the door. The sound of a lock clicking open. The door swung inward. And Jackson Wade found himself staring at the woman who would destroy everything he thought he knew about himself. She was not what he expected. Ruth had warned him, but the reality still caught him off guard. She was thin, too thin. Her black dress hung on her frame like a sail on a broken mast. Her dark hair was pulled back severely from a face that might have been beautiful if it held any color at all. She looked like a woman who had been running for a long time and had finally stopped because there was nowhere left to go. But her eyes were green as spring grass after rain. And in them burned something that made Jackson take a step backward, something wild and desperate and dangerous, like a wounded animal that would bite the hand trying to help it. "Mr. Wade," she said. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. "I am Eleanor." She extended her hand. Jackson took it automatically. Her grip was firm, too firm for a delicate Eastern lady, and her palm was rough with calluses. Not the hands of a woman who spent her days doing needlework. "Miss Eleanor," he said carefully. "Welcome to Montana." Something flickered across her face. Fear, perhaps, or relief, maybe both. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know the weather is bad. I would understand if you wanted to wait until spring to—" "We marry tomorrow." Jackson cut her off. "Reverend Mills will perform the ceremony before the next storm hits. Then we ride for my ranch." Her green eyes widened. "Tomorrow. But we have not even—" "We will have plenty of time to talk at the ranch," he said. "For now you should rest. It is a long journey, and you look like you need sleep." He turned to leave. "Mr. Wade." He stopped but did not turn around. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a chance." Jackson stood there for a long moment. Something in her voice tugged at him. Something broken that called to the broken parts of himself. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow, your new life begins." He walked away without looking back. But as he descended the stairs, he could not shake the feeling that he had just made either the best or worst decision of his life. And in his mind, the name echoed. Daniel. Who the hell was Daniel? The wedding was the shortest ceremony Jackson had ever witnessed. Reverend Mills stood before them in his small church speaking words that should have meant something, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. "Until death do you part." Jackson heard them as if from a great distance. His attention remained fixed on the woman beside him. Eleanor had changed from her mourning dress into something gray. Not quite black, but close enough. Her hair was still pulled back severely, and her face was still pale as fresh snow. But she stood straight and spoke her vows in a voice that did not waver. "I do," she said. 2 words, simple and final. Jackson said the same, and suddenly they were married, man and wife, bound together by law and God and a piece of paper that Reverend Mills handed to them with ink still wet. "Congratulations," the Reverend said. "May your union be blessed." They walked out of the church into a world gone white. The storm had passed in the night, but left behind 3 feet of fresh snow. The sky was clear and blue and painfully bright. Jackson squinted against the glare. "The wagon is ready," Ruth said from the church steps. "Tom loaded your supplies this morning. There is food for a week and extra blankets. And I packed some of my biscuits for the road." Jackson nodded his thanks. He helped Eleanor climb onto the wagon seat and pulled a buffalo robe over her legs. She did not protest, did not speak at all, just sat there staring straight ahead with those green eyes that revealed nothing. They left Silver Creek behind as the sun climbed toward noon. The journey to the ranch would take 6 hours in good conditions. Today, with the deep snow, it might take 8 or more. Jackson guided the horses carefully. The trail was barely visible beneath the white blanket. One wrong step could send them tumbling into a ravine. Eleanor sat beside him in silence. Her hands were folded in her lap, proper and still, like a porcelain doll. But Jackson had seen those hands last night, calloused and strong, working hands, ranch hands, perhaps. Who are you, he thought. What are you running from? And why did you choose me to run too? 3 hours into the journey, she finally spoke. Your foreman, she said. The one who cannot talk. How did that happen? Jackson glanced at her. It was the first time she had shown interest in anything since they met. Tom is Crow, he said. Half Crow, anyway. His mother was white, captured in a raid when she was young. She died giving birth to him. The tribe raised him as one of their own until he was 15. What happened when he was 15? Soldiers came. They were supposed to be making peace, but one of them got drunk and shot a chief's son. The tribe retaliated. Tom tried to stop the killing on both sides. They cut out his tongue for being a traitor. Eleanor absorbed this in silence. Then said, "That is terrible. It was a long time ago. He does not speak of it, obviously." The ghost of a smile crossed her face, then vanished. They rode on. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened and the temperature began to drop. "We will not make it to the ranch before dark," Jackson said. "There is a cabin about 2 miles ahead. We will shelter there for the night." Eleanor nodded. If she was disappointed or relieved, he could not tell. The cabin appeared just as the last light faded. A small structure built into a hillside. Abandoned years ago, but still solid. Jackson had used it before when storms caught him far from home. He helped Eleanor down from the wagon and unlocked the door. The interior was dark and cold. A single room with a fireplace and a wooden bed frame and nothing else. "I will start a fire," Jackson said. "You should eat something." He went to work gathering kindling from the woodpile outside. When he returned, Eleanor was standing by the window staring out at the darkness. She had removed her bonnet. Her dark hair tumbled down her back in waves. Without the severe style, she looked younger, softer, almost vulnerable. Jackson built the fire and got it burning strong. Warmth began to fill the small space. He unpacked some of Ruth's biscuits and dried meat and offered them to Eleanor. She took the food and ate mechanically, like someone who had forgotten what hunger felt like. "You should sleep," Jackson said. "I will take the floor." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. Her green eyes traveled over his face, taking in the scar and the hard lines and the gray at his temples. "You do not have to do that," she said quietly. "Do what? Treat me like I'm made of glass. I know what marriage means. I know what is expected." Jackson felt his jaw tighten. "Nothing is expected," he said. "Not tonight. Not until you are ready. And if I am never ready." He met her gaze steadily. "Then you are never ready. I did not bring you here to force myself on you, Eleanor. I brought you here because I need a partner. Someone to help run the ranch. Someone to share the work and the silence and the long winters. That is all I ask. Everything else is your choice." She stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. The wariness did not disappear, but it softened slightly. "You are not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you." She almost smiled, then turned away and began preparing for bed. She removed her shoes and her outer dress, but kept her undergarments on. Modest, but practical. She climbed onto the bed and pulled the buffalo robe over herself. Jackson settled onto the floor near the fire. The wooden planks were hard and cold, but he had slept on worse. Much worse. He was almost asleep when he heard it, crying, soft and muffled, like she was trying to hide it, and through the tears that name again. Daniel. Jackson lay in the darkness and listened. His mind worked through the possibilities. A brother, perhaps. A father. A lover. Or a husband. The advertisement had required unmarried women. But widows were technically unmarried. If she had lost her husband recently, it would explain the mourning clothes, the grief, the running. But it would not explain the fear. Jackson had spent years reading people. Tracking men required understanding them, predicting their moves, getting inside their heads. And everything about Eleanor screamed fear. Not grief, not sorrow. Fear. She was not mourning someone she had lost. She was running from someone who was hunting her. The fire crackled and popped. Outside, the wind began to rise. Another storm was coming. Jackson closed his eyes and made a decision. He would not push her, would not demand answers. She would tell him the truth when she was ready, or she would not tell him at all. Either way, he had made a promise before God and man. She was his wife now, his responsibility. Whatever darkness was chasing her, it would have to go through him first. He slept and dreamed of a woman with blood on her chest and accusation in her dying eyes. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had circled around and missed them. Jackson woke to find Eleanor already up and dressed. She had restarted the fire and was heating water for coffee. "You did not have to do that," he said. "I wanted to." She handed him a cup. Her fingers brushed his, and she pulled back quickly. "It is the least I can do." They ate a quick breakfast and packed the wagon. The second half of the journey was easier. The trail had been packed down by previous travelers, and the horses knew they were heading home. The ranch came into view just after noon. It was modest but well built. A log house with a stone chimney, a barn large enough for a dozen horses, a corral where 2 animals stood watching their approach, and beyond it all the mountains rose white and eternal against the sky. "This is yours," Eleanor asked. "Ours," Jackson corrected. "Everything you see belongs to us now." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "It is beautiful." He helped her down from the wagon and showed her inside. The main room with its fireplace and rough furniture, the kitchen with its iron stove and wooden shelves, the bedroom with its large bed and handmade quilt. "I will sleep here," Jackson said, pointing to the main room. "The bedroom is yours." Eleanor shook her head. "This is your home. I will not take your bed. It is your home, too. And a wife should have her own space." They argued for several minutes. Neither would back down. Finally, they compromised. They would share the bedroom, but Jackson would sleep on a pallet on the floor until she said otherwise. It was not ideal, but it was a start. That night, Jackson lay on his pallet, listening to Eleanor breathe. She had fallen asleep quickly. The journey had exhausted her, but even in sleep she was restless, tossing and turning, murmuring words he could not understand. Once she cried out sharply and sat up in bed. Her eyes were wide and wild in the darkness. "Daniel," she gasped. "Daniel, no." Jackson stayed still, watching, waiting. After a moment, she seemed to realize where she was. Her breathing slowed. She lay back down and did not speak again. But Jackson did not sleep. Daniel. The name echoed in his mind. Familiar. Too familiar. He had heard it before, spoken in fear and rage and desperation. Daniel Moran. The realization hit him like a bullet to the chest. Daniel Moran. Bank robber. Train robber. Killer. The most wanted man in 4 territories 3 years ago. Jackson had tracked him across Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, had finally caught him in a dusty border town, had watched him hang in a federal prison 6 months later. Daniel Moran had a wife, a young woman who disappeared after his arrest, a woman no one had seen since, a woman named Eleanor. Jackson stared at the ceiling as understanding washed over him. His mail-order bride, his quiet wife, his chance at redemption. She was the widow of the man he had hunted, the man whose capture had haunted Jackson's dreams for 3 years, the man whose death had driven Jackson to quit bounty hunting and flee to Montana. What had he done? What the hell had he done? Jackson Wade did not sleep for the next 3 nights. He went through the motions of ranch work, feeding the horses, checking the cattle, repairing fences that the winter had damaged. But his mind was elsewhere, trapped in a loop of memory and suspicion and growing dread. Eleanor Moran, wife of Daniel Moran, the most dangerous outlaw Jackson had ever hunted. Did she know? That was the question that ate at him. Did she know that the man she had married was the same man who had put her husband in prison? The same man who had effectively killed him? He watched her constantly, looking for signs of recognition, signs of hatred, signs that she was playing some elaborate game of revenge. But Eleanor showed him nothing. She moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals, cleaning floors, mending clothes that did not need mending. Always busy, always quiet, always watching him with those green eyes that revealed nothing. On the 4th morning, Silent Tom rode in from the back pastures with news. Jackson was in the barn brushing down Caesar when Tom appeared in the doorway. The old Crow man's hands moved rapidly. His face was grim. Strangers, Tom signed. In town, asking questions. Jackson's hands stilled on the horse's flank. What kind of questions? About a woman. Dark hair, green eyes. Came on the stage last week. Jackson felt the cold spread through his chest. Who is asking? Tom shook his head. Did not see them. Ruth sent word. She says be careful. Jackson nodded slowly. Tell no one my wife is here. If anyone asks, she never arrived. Tom's dark eyes held understanding. He had not survived 60 years in a hostile world by asking unnecessary questions. He nodded once and disappeared. Jackson finished with Caesar and walked toward the house. His mind raced through possibilities. Someone was looking for Eleanor. Someone who had tracked her across 1,000 miles to this frozen territory. Marcus Moran. The name surfaced from memory like a corpse rising in still water. Daniel Moran had a brother. Older, meaner, more dangerous by half. Marcus had run the gang while Daniel did the robbing. When Daniel got caught, Marcus went to ground. Disappeared completely. The law assumed he had fled to Mexico. But what if he had not fled? What if he had spent 3 years hunting the woman who might know where Daniel hid $50,000 in stolen money? Jackson entered the house to find Eleanor at the stove. She was making soup from dried beans and salt pork. Her movements were efficient, practiced, not the clumsy efforts of a city girl learning frontier cooking. Eleanor. She turned. Yes? Jackson studied her face. Pale, thin, beautiful in a haunted way. The face of a woman carrying secrets too heavy for her narrow shoulders. When you answered my advertisement, he said slowly, what made you choose Montana? Her expression flickered, just for an instant, then smoothed into neutrality. It seemed far away, she said. Peaceful. I wanted to start over somewhere no one knew me. And where were you starting over from? Silence stretched between them. The soup bubbled on the stove. Outside, the wind moaned against the walls. Does it matter? She asked finally. I am here now. I am your wife. It matters if someone is looking for you. Her face went white, whiter than the snow outside. Her hand gripped the wooden spoon so hard her knuckles showed through the skin. What do you mean? She whispered. Strangers in town, Jackson said, asking about a dark-haired woman who arrived last week. Asking by name. What name? Your name, Eleanor. Your real name. She stood frozen. A deer caught in a hunter's sights. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes darted toward the door, then back to Jackson. I should go, she said. I should leave before they... No. The word came out harder than he intended. She flinched. Jackson forced his voice softer. You are not going anywhere. You are my wife. This is your home. Whatever is chasing you, it stops here. You do not understand, she said. The people looking for me, they are not. They will hurt you. They will hurt anyone who— I understand more than you think, Jackson interrupted. Sit down, Eleanor. We need to talk. She did not move. Her body was coiled tight, ready to run. He could see it in every line of her frame. 3 years of running had taught her to always have one foot out the door. Jackson crossed the room slowly, like approaching a wild horse. He stopped an arm's length away. I know who your husband was, he said quietly. She stopped breathing. I know he was Daniel Moran. I know he robbed banks and trains and killed men who got in his way. I know he died in federal prison 2 years ago. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Threat, perhaps, or understanding. How she breathed. How do you know that? Jackson let the silence stretch, then said, because I was the one who caught him. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Eleanor stared at him. Her face cycled through emotions too fast to track. Shock, horror, rage, and finally something that looked almost like relief. You, she said. You were the bounty hunter. Yes. You put him in prison. Yes. He died there. Because of you. Jackson nodded slowly. He died of typhoid 6 months after his conviction. But yes, I put him there. I am the reason he is dead. Eleanor's hand came up. For a moment, Jackson thought she would slap him. Instead, she pressed her palm against her own mouth, stifling a sound that might have been a sob or might have been a laugh. She turned away, walked to the window, stood staring out at the white emptiness. I hated you, she said finally. Her voice was flat, distant. For 2 years I hated you without knowing your name or your face. You took him from me. You destroyed my life. Jackson said nothing. There was nothing to say. But now she continued. Now I am married to you, living in your house, eating your food, and the man I hated is the only thing standing between me and his brother, Marcus, Jackson said. She turned to face him. Surprise flickered in her eyes. You know about Marcus. I know he ran the gang. I know he disappeared after Daniel's arrest. I know he would kill his own mother for $50,000. Eleanor laughed. A bitter, broken sound. He does not want the money, she said. I mean, he does, but that is not why he is hunting me. Then why? She hugged herself, arms wrapped tight around her thin frame. He blames me, she said, for Daniel getting caught. He thinks I betrayed him, told the law where he would be. Did you? No. Her voice cracked. I did not even know what Daniel really was until after his arrest. He told me he was a cattle buyer, that the money came from honest work. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I was young and stupid and in love. Jackson absorbed this. His instincts said she was telling the truth. But instincts could be wrong. He had trusted them before and people had died. What does Marcus think you know, he asked, where Daniel hid the money from the last job, $50,000 that was never recovered. Marcus is convinced Daniel told me before he was taken. Did he? Eleanor shook her head. Daniel never told me anything. He kept me in a cage of pretty lies until the bars slammed shut. I do not know where the money is. I do not know if it even exists. But Marcus will never believe that. So he has been hunting you for 2 years, 3, since the day Daniel died. I have run from Kentucky to Missouri to Kansas to here. Every time I think I am safe, he finds me. Every time I start to build a life, he burns it down. Her voice broke on the last words. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped them away angrily. I thought Montana would be far enough, she said. I thought if I married someone strong, someone who could protect me. But I was stupid. Again, always stupid. Jackson crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch, but not touching. You are not stupid, he said. You are surviving. That takes more strength than most people will ever know. She looked up at him, green eyes swimming with tears. Why are you helping me? She asked. You have every reason to throw me out, to hand me over to Marcus and wash your hands of the whole mess. Because I made you a promise, Jackson said. Before God and man, I said I would keep you safe. I meant it, even knowing who I am, what I bring with me. Jackson reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. He cupped her face in his rough hands. His thumbs brushed the tears from her cheeks. I have done things, Eleanor, he said quietly. Things that would make Marcus Moran look like a choir boy. I hunted men for money. I killed 11 of them. One was a woman who got between me and my target. Eleanor's breath caught. I came to Montana to escape what I was, Jackson continued, to build something clean on the ashes of all that blood. When I sent for a mail-order bride, I was looking for salvation. I thought a gentle woman could wash away my sins. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Instead, I got you, he said. A wildcat in a lamb's skin, the widow of a man I helped destroy. And somehow that feels more right than anything I planned. You should hate me, she whispered. Probably. And you should hate me. I did. I do. I do not know anymore. Jackson released her face, stepped back, gave her room to breathe. Here is what I know, he said. Marcus is coming. When he gets here, he will try to take you. He will probably try to kill me. Maybe everyone else within reach. Eleanor shuddered. But Jackson continued. I have faced worse than Marcus Moran. I have tracked men through deserts and mountains and frozen wastelands. I have killed with my bare hands when I had to. If Marcus wants you, he will have to go through me first. She stared at him. The fear in her eyes was still there. But something else was growing alongside it, something that looked almost like hope. Why, she asked again. Why would you risk your life for me? Jackson considered the question, considered all the complicated answers he could give, about guilt and redemption and the desperate need to finally protect someone instead of hunting them. In the end, he said the simple truth. Because you are mine now, and I protect what is mine. The next week passed in tense waiting. Jackson fortified the ranch. He set tripwires around the perimeter, stashed weapons in strategic locations, taught Eleanor to shoot a rifle because the pistol she carried in her bag was not enough for what was coming. She learned quickly, too quickly for a delicate Eastern flower. When he commented on it, she admitted the truth. My father raised horses in Kentucky, she said. I learned to ride before I could walk, and Daniel taught me to shoot after we married. Said a woman alone needed protection. Not so alone now, Jackson said. She looked at him with those complicated green eyes. No, not so alone. They fell into a rhythm, working side by side during the day, eating together in the evening, sleeping in the same room but not the same bed. The tension between them grew with each passing night. Jackson found himself watching her constantly, the way she moved, the way she laughed when Silent Tom made one of his rare jokes in sign language, the way her whole face lit up when she worked with the horses. She was not what he had wanted, not gentle or quiet or easy. She was better. On the 8th night, the temperature dropped to 40 below zero, the coldest night of the year. Jackson built the fire high, and still the cold crept in through every crack. Eleanor could not stop shivering. Her lips turned blue. Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. This is ridiculous, Jackson said finally. Get in the bed. I will keep the fire going. You will freeze on that pallet. Better me than you. She shook her head. No, we are both getting in the bed. For warmth. Nothing else. He hesitated. She was right. It was a matter of survival. But the thought of lying beside her in the darkness made his blood run hot, despite the cold. Jackson climbed into the bed. Eleanor pressed against his back. Her thin arms wrapped around his waist. Her breath was warm against his neck. They lay there in silence. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what? For not making me do this alone." Jackson covered her hands with his own. Her fingers were ice cold. He rubbed them gently, trying to bring back the warmth. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "You will never be alone again. I promise." She pressed closer. Her body fit against his like it was made for that purpose. "Jackson," she murmured. "Yes, I do not hate you anymore. I do not think I ever really did." He turned in her arms, faced her in the darkness. Her green eyes reflected the firelight, beautiful and haunted, and finally at peace. "Eleanor," he said. "Yes." He kissed her. The kiss changed everything. Jackson had meant it to be gentle, a question rather than a statement. But the moment their lips touched, something broke loose inside both of them. 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of sleeping alone and waking to nightmares. All of it poured out in that kiss. Eleanor's hands fisted in his shirt. She pulled him closer with a desperation that matched his own. Her mouth opened under his, and she tasted like coffee and salt, and something wild that made his head spin. "Wait!" Jackson gasped, pulling back. "We should not." "Why not?" Her voice was rough, breathless. Her eyes blazed in the firelight. "Because you are scared. Because I am the man who killed your husband. Because this will only make everything more complicated." Eleanor laughed, sharp and bitter. "Complicated," she said. "My life has been complicated since the day I met Daniel Moran. At least this complication I'm choosing for myself." She kissed him again, harder this time. Her hands worked at the buttons of his shirt. Her body pressed against his with unmistakable intent. Jackson's control shattered. They came together in the darkness with a fury that surprised them both. It was not gentle, not tender. It was two broken people clinging to each other while the storm raged outside, finding warmth in the cold, finding life in the shadow of death. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweat cooling on their skin, breath slowly returning to normal. Eleanor traced the scar on Jackson's face with one finger. Her touch was light, almost reverent. "How did you get this?" she asked. "Knife fight," Jackson said. "Tombstone. 6 years ago." "Did you kill him?" "Yes." She nodded. No judgment in her eyes, just acceptance. "Tell me about the woman," she said quietly. "The one who got between you and your target." Jackson stiffened. That was the one story he never told. The nightmare that woke him sweating in the small hours. The ghost that followed him wherever he went. "Her name was Maria," he said finally. "She was married to a man named Cortez, Mexican bandit, wanted for murder in 3 territories. I tracked Cortez to a farmhouse outside Tucson. When I went in, he used Maria as a shield, put her between himself and my gun." His voice went flat, distant. "I thought I had a clean shot. I was wrong. The bullet went through her chest and into his shoulder. She died instantly. He lived long enough for me to finish the job." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "It was not your fault. Cortez killed her, not you. I pulled the trigger. He forced her into that position. He used her like a piece of furniture. You were trying to stop a murderer." Jackson shook his head. "I have heard all the arguments, Eleanor. Made them to myself 1,000 times. But it does not change the fact that I looked a dying woman in the eyes and watched the life leave them. Because of me." "Is that why you quit?" she asked. "Why you came to Montana?" "Yes. I could not do it anymore. Hunt men for money. Risk more innocent lives. I had to stop before I lost whatever humanity I had left." Eleanor propped herself on one elbow, looked down at him with those green eyes that saw too much. "You think marrying me will redeem you," she said, "that saving me from Marcus will make up for Maria." Jackson considered lying, decided she deserved better. "Yes," he admitted, "that is part of it. And the other part. He reached up and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The other part is that I wanted something good in my life, something real. I thought a quiet wife would give me that. Instead, I got you. And I am not quiet. No, you are loud and stubborn, and you carry a gun in your traveling bag. You are nothing like what I planned. Is that bad? Jackson pulled her down and kissed her forehead. It is the best thing that ever happened to me, he said. Morning came gray and cold, but the storm had passed. Jackson woke to find Eleanor already dressed and making breakfast. She moved differently now, looser, more comfortable in her own skin. She looked up when he entered the main room, smiled, actually smiled. Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife. They ate together in companionable silence. When the meal was done, Eleanor said, I want to learn to work the ranch. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Not just cooking and cleaning, she continued, the real work, riding, roping, handling cattle. If I'm going to live here, I want to be useful. It is hard work, Jackson warned, cold and dirty and dangerous. I have been cold and dirty and in danger for 3 years. At least this way I will have something to show for it. He could not argue with that logic. They spent the morning in the corral. Jackson had a horse called Diablo, who was too wild for most riders. Eleanor took one look at the black stallion, and her eyes lit up. That one, she said. I want to ride that one. He will throw you. Let him try. She approached Diablo slowly, speaking in low tones, Spanish words that Jackson did not recognize. The horse's ears flicked forward, his stamping hooves stilled. Within an hour, Eleanor was on his back. Within 2 hours, she was riding him around the corral like they had known each other for years. Where did you learn that? Jackson asked when she finally dismounted. The Spanish, the horse handling. Eleanor's smile faded slightly. Daniel taught me, she said. He grew up around horses in Mexico, before he became what he became. She paused, stroked Diablo's neck. That was the worst part, she said quietly. He was not always a monster. In the beginning, he was kind, gentle. He made me laugh, made me feel safe. Jackson said nothing, just listened. I do not know when he changed. Maybe he was always that way underneath, and I was too blind to see it. Or maybe the life twisted him into something dark. Either way, by the time I realized what he really was, it was too late. I was in too deep. Did he hurt you? Not with his fists. She turned to face Jackson. He hurt me with lies, with control, with making me feel like I was nothing without him. That kind of pain does not leave bruises, but it scars all the same. Jackson reached for her, pulled her against his chest. You are not nothing, he said into her hair. You survived him. You survived 3 years of running. You survived Marcus hunting you across half the country. You are the strongest person I have ever met. She laughed wetly against his shirt. You hunt dangerous men for a living. Hunted, she corrected. Past tense. Past tense. And none of them scared me half as much as you do. She pulled back, looked up at him with confusion in her eyes. Why would I scare you? Because Jackson said slowly. When I look at you, I do not see a mail-order bride or a widow or a woman in trouble. I see the rest of my life, and that terrifies me. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, then rose on her toes and kissed him softly. Good, she whispered. I would hate to be the only one terrified. That afternoon, Sheriff Cole came to the ranch. Jackson saw the rider approaching from a distance, recognized the badge glinting on the man's chest. His hand dropped to the pistol at his hip before he remembered that Cole was supposed to be a friend. Jackson, Cole called as he dismounted. Been a while. Henry, what brings you out here? Cole was a big man with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too much death. He and Jackson had ridden together in the old days, before Montana, before either of them had tried to become respectable. Trouble, Cole said simply. Heard some things in town, thought you should know. Jackson led him inside. Eleanor was at the stove. She turned when they entered, and her face went pale at the sight of the badge. "Easy," Jackson said. "Cole is a friend." The sheriff removed his hat. "Ma'am, you must be the new Mrs. Wade. Pleasure to meet you." Eleanor nodded but did not speak. Her hands gripped the counter behind her. Cole settled into a chair by the fire, accepted the whiskey Jackson offered. "Got some strangers in town," he said. "4 men, hard-looking. Been asking questions about a woman matching your wife's description." Jackson felt Eleanor's fear from across the room. "What kind of questions? Where she is staying, who she married, whether she seems to have any money?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. But you know how small towns work. Someone will talk eventually, especially for the right price." "What right price?" $500. Cole met Jackson's eyes. "That is what they are offering for information leading to Eleanor Moran." The name hung in the air. Eleanor made a small sound, almost a whimper. Cole glanced at her, then back at Jackson. "I am guessing there is a story there," he said quietly. "There is a story." Jackson set down his glass. "But it is not mine to tell." "Fair enough." Cole stood. "I came to warn you, Jackson. These men are not playing games. I have seen their type before. They will kill anyone who gets in their way. Let them try." Cole studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The old Jackson Wade," he said. "I was wondering when he would show up. He's always here. I just keep him on a short leash." Cole put on his hat, headed for the door, then stopped. "One more thing. The leader of this bunch, big man with a scar across his throat, calls himself Marcus." Eleanor gasped. Cole looked at her. "Whatever he owes you, ma'am, I am sorry for it. But he is not going to stop. Men like that never do." He left. The sound of his horse's hooves faded into silence. Eleanor sank into a chair. Her whole body was shaking. "He found me," she whispered. "Again." "He always finds me." Jackson knelt before her, took her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me," he said. "Marcus Moran is a dangerous man. But I have killed men more dangerous than him. He will not touch you, I swear it. You do not know him." She looked at Jackson with wild eyes. "He is not like Daniel. Daniel was cruel, but Marcus is crazy. He raised Daniel after their parents died, taught him everything. When Daniel was captured, Marcus went insane. He blames me. Says I led the law to Daniel. That I betrayed his baby brother for the reward money. Did you?" "No. I did not even know Daniel was wanted until they dragged him away in chains. But Marcus will not believe that. He will never believe that." Jackson stood. His mind was already working, calculating distances, evaluating resources, planning for war. "How many men does Marcus have?" he asked. "It varies. When he was hunting me, before he had as many as 10. But that was when he had money. Now I do not know. And he thinks you know where Daniel hid $50,000. "Yes. Money from the last job. The robbery that got Daniel caught. Marcus is convinced Daniel told me where to find it before he died." Jackson remembered the case. A train robbery gone wrong. 3 guards dead. 50,000 in gold and currency vanished. Daniel captured, but the money never recovered. "Did he tell you?" Jackson asked. Eleanor shook her head. "Daniel was unconscious when they took him. The fever was already eating his brain. He did not even recognize me at the end, just kept calling for his mama. For Marcus." Her voice cracked. "The last thing he said to me was, 'Please, brother, do not let them take me.'" Jackson pulled her to her feet, into his arms. She buried her face against his chest and wept. "I hate him," she sobbed. "I hate him for what he did to me, for what he made me. And I hate myself for ever loving him." Jackson held her. Let her cry. Let her rage against the dead man who had ruined her life and the living one who wanted to end it. When the tears finally stopped, he cupped her face in his hands. "Here is what is going to happen," he said. "We are going to prepare this ranch for a siege. We are going to gather weapons and supplies and make this place into a fortress. And when Marcus comes, we are going to show him what happens to men who threaten what is mine." He kissed her forehead. "You are not running anymore, Eleanor. Your running days are over. This is your home. I am your husband. And God help anyone who tries to take either from you." They had 3 days to prepare. Jackson used every one of them. He set tripwires in the brush around the house, buried supplies in the root cellar, taught Eleanor to load and fire the Winchester rifle until she could do it in her sleep. She learned with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. No complaints, no tears, just grim focus on the task at hand. On the second night, they sat together by the fire, cleaning weapons. The smell of gun oil filled the air. Outside, the wind moaned and the temperature dropped towards 0. "Tell me about your childhood," Eleanor said. "I realized I do not know anything about your life before we met." Jackson worked the oiled cloth along the rifle barrel. His past was not something he spoke of easily, but she had shared her secrets with him. It was only fair. "I never knew my parents," he said. "Found in a doorway in Kansas City when I was a few days old. Spent the first 10 years in an orphanage. Left when I was old enough to work. Left or ran away. Ran away. The older boys were using the younger ones for sport. I was small but quick. Got out before they got to me." "What did you do?" "Whatever I could. Mucked stables, drove cattle. Hired on with outfits heading west. By the time I was 16, I was a fair hand with horses and a dead shot with a pistol, and bounty hunting." Jackson set down the rifle, reached for another. "That came later. I was working for a rancher in New Mexico when some bandits hit his herd. Killed 3 of his men. I tracked them down and brought back what was left, dead or alive. Mostly dead." Jackson's voice went flat. "The rancher paid me more for those bodies than I had made in a year of honest work. After that, I did not see much point in going back to cattle." He worked in silence for a moment. "I was good at it," he continued. "Tracking, hunting, reading sign that other men missed. The law paid top dollar for dangerous fugitives, and I brought them in faster than anyone else in the territory. How many years? 8. 8 years of blood and death and always moving, always hunting. And Maria ended it." "Yes." He looked at Eleanor. "After Maria, I could not do it anymore. Came to Montana, built this ranch, tried to become someone different. Did it work?" Eleanor reached over and took his hand. "You tell me," she said. Jackson turned her palm over, traced the calluses with his thumb. "I thought it was working," he admitted. "Then you showed up on that stagecoach and everything got complicated again. Good complicated or bad complicated?" He kissed her palm. "The best kind." On the third day, Silent Tom returned from a scouting mission with grim news. His hands moved rapidly. Jackson translated for Eleanor. 4 men camped 2 miles east, watching the ranch. They have been there since yesterday." Eleanor went pale. "That is closer than I expected. They are waiting for something," Jackson said. "Probably reinforcements. Or the right moment to strike. What do? We let them wait. And we get ready." That night, Jackson did not sleep. He sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. Eleanor tried to stay awake with him, but exhaustion claimed her eventually. She curled up on the bed, still dressed, ready to move at a moment's notice. He watched her sleep, the rise and fall of her chest, the way her hair spread across the pillow, the small frown between her brows that never quite disappeared, even in rest. "I will protect you," he promised silently, "whatever it takes." Dawn came gray and cold. Jackson was making coffee when Tom burst through the door, signing frantically. "They are coming. 8 men. Coming from the east." Jackson grabbed his rifle. Eleanor was already on her feet, her pistol in hand. "How long?" Jackson asked. 10 minutes, maybe less." "Get to the root cellar," Jackson told Eleanor. "There is a false panel in the back. Stay hidden until I come for you." "No." Her jaw set stubbornly. "I am not hiding while you fight alone." "Damn it, Eleanor, this is not the time for—" "I said no." She checked the cylinder of her pistol, snapped it shut. "I have been running from Marcus for 3 years. I am done running. If he wants me, he can come and get me." Jackson wanted to argue, to throw her over his shoulder and lock her in the cellar himself. But the look in her eyes stopped him. This was her fight, too. Denying her the right to face it would be another kind of cage. "Fine," he said, "but stay behind cover. And if I tell you to run, you run." She nodded. They took positions. Jackson at the front window, Tom at the back door, Eleanor behind the overturned kitchen table with the rifle she had learned to shoot. Minutes crawled by. The silence was absolute. Then Jackson saw them. 8 riders emerging from the tree line, moving slowly, spreading out to surround the house. At the front rode a big man with a scar across his throat. Marcus Moran. Jackson had never met him in person, but he had seen the wanted posters. The description matched. Thick build, dark hair going gray, eyes like chips of ice. Marcus stopped his horse 50 yards from the house. His men fanned out on either side. "Wade," he shouted, "I know you're in there, and I know you have something that belongs to me." Eleanor made a sound, something between a sob and a growl. Jackson opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. His rifle hung loose in his hands. "Not aimed. Not yet." "Moran," he called back, "you are trespassing on my land. I suggest you turn around and ride away while you still can." Marcus laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. Tough talk from a broken-down bounty hunter. "I know who you are, Wade. You are the man who captured my brother, the man who destroyed my family. Your brother destroyed himself. I just helped him along." Marcus's face twisted with rage. "He was supposed to be better than me," he spat. "Smarter, faster. He was going to build an empire, and then you came along and ruined everything." Jackson said nothing. Let the man talk. Let him work himself into a frenzy. Angry men made mistakes. "But now I have a chance to make things right," Marcus continued. "Give me the woman and I will let you live. Keep her and you die. Simple as that." Jackson's finger tightened on the trigger. "The woman is my wife," he said. "She is under my protection. If you want her, you will have to go through me." Marcus smiled. A predator's smile. "I was hoping you would say that." He raised his hand. His men lifted their rifles. The first shot came from the house. Silent Tom's rifle cracked, and one of Marcus's men tumbled from his horse. Then all hell broke loose. Bullets tore through the morning air. Jackson dove behind the porch railing as wood splintered around him. He returned fire. Saw another of Marcus's men go down. Inside the house, Eleanor's rifle spoke. A third rider fell. Marcus was screaming orders. His remaining men dismounted and scattered, taking cover behind rocks and trees and the bodies of their horses. Jackson counted quickly. 3 down, 5 still fighting, and Marcus himself, who had retreated to a safe distance. The shooting continued for several minutes, both sides exchanging fire without hitting much. Jackson conserved his ammunition. He knew they could not win a prolonged fight. Eventually they would run out of bullets or Marcus would bring more men. A cry came from the back of the house. "Tom!" Jackson sprinted through the main room, found Tom slumped against the wall. Blood poured from a wound in his shoulder. "How bad?" Jackson asked. Tom signed with his good hand. "Not the worst I have had. Go." "They are trying to flank us!" Jackson grabbed more ammunition and returned to the front. Eleanor was still firing methodically. One shot, pause, another shot. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady. "Tom is hit," he told her. "Bad. He will live. But we need to end this soon." Eleanor pointed toward the tree line. "I saw Marcus circle around. He is heading for the barn." The barn. Where they kept the horses. Where they stored most of their supplies. "Stay here," Jackson said. "Keep them pinned down." "Jackson." She grabbed his arm. "Be careful." He kissed her hard. Then slipped out the back door. The cold hit him like a physical blow. He moved low and fast, using the buildings for cover. His boots crunched on the frozen snow. The barn door was open. Jackson approached from the side, pressed himself against the wall. Listened. Footsteps inside. One set, slow and cautious. He spun around the doorframe. Rifle up. Marcus stood in the middle of the barn. He had a pistol in one hand and a torch in the other. Drop it, Jackson ordered. Marcus smiled. That same predator smile. Hello, bounty hunter. So nice to finally meet the man who ruined my life. Drop the gun and the torch. Now. Or what? You will shoot me. Marcus laughed. Go ahead. But this barn goes up with me, and I imagine you cannot afford to lose what is inside. Jackson's eyes flicked to the torch, the hay stacked in the loft, the horses stamping nervously in their stalls. What do you want, Moran? You know what I want, the money. $50,000 that my brother hid before you dragged him off to die. I do not have your money, but your wife does, or she knows where it is. Either way, I am not leaving without it. Jackson took a step forward. Marcus raised the torch toward the hay. Do not be stupid, Marcus warned. One false move and your pretty ranch becomes an inferno. She does not know where the money is, Jackson said. Daniel never told her. Liar. It is the truth. He was unconscious when they captured him, burning with fever. He could barely remember his own name. Then she is useless to me. Marcus's eyes went cold, which means I can kill her slowly instead of quickly. Jackson's control snapped. He fired. The bullet caught Marcus in the shoulder, the same shoulder where Jackson had shot him years ago. Marcus screamed and dropped the torch, but the torch fell into the hay. Fire erupted. Jackson lunged for Marcus, grabbed his collar before he could flee, slammed him against the wall. Where are the rest of your men? Jackson demanded. Marcus laughed through his pain. Dead or dying, your wife is a better shot than I expected. The fire was spreading. Smoke filled the barn. The horses were screaming. Jackson made a decision. He dragged Marcus out of the barn, threw him in the snow, then ran back inside. The horses first. He threw open stall doors, slapped rumps, drove them toward the exit. Diablo went last. The black stallion reared and fought, but Jackson grabbed his mane and hauled him out into the cold. By the time he was done, the barn was fully engulfed. Jackson stood in the snow watching years of work go up in flames. His supplies, his tools, his winter feed, gone. Marcus was on his knees clutching his shoulder, blood seeped between his fingers. You should have let me burn, he said. It would have been easier. Jackson walked over, looked down at the man who had caused so much pain. I am done making things easy, he said. You are going to stand trial for what you have done. The murders, the robberies, the years of terrorizing innocent people. They will hang me. Probably. Marcus laughed bitterly. Then why bother with a trial? Just shoot me now. End it like you ended Daniel. Because, Jackson said quietly, that is not who I am anymore. Eleanor appeared at his side. Her face was streaked with soot, and her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. She looked down at Marcus, the man who had hunted her for 3 years, who had destroyed every attempt she made to build a new life. It is over, she said. You cannot hurt me anymore. Marcus spat at her feet. You think this ends with me. My men will come. My brothers in crime will seek revenge. You will never be safe. Then we will face them together. Eleanor took Jackson's hand. Like we faced you. She turned away, did not look back. Jackson signaled to Tom, who had emerged from the house with his arm in a makeshift sling. The old crow man limped over and helped secure Marcus's hands with rope. What do we do with him? Tom signed. We take him to town. Let Sheriff Cole deal with him, and if Cole will not cooperate, then we make him. The ride to Silver Creek took 4 hours. Marcus was bound and gagged and thrown over the back of a horse. His surviving men had fled during the fire. Jackson doubted they would cause any more trouble. Without their leader, they were just criminals looking for easier prey. Sheriff Cole was waiting on the steps of his office when they arrived. Jackson, he said slowly, I see you have been busy. This man needs to be locked up, Jackson replied. He attacked my ranch, tried to kill my wife, burned my barn to the ground. Cole's eyes moved to Marcus. Recognition flickered. Marcus Moran. There is a federal warrant out for this one. $10,000 dead or alive. He is alive, Jackson said. Barely. See that he stays that way long enough for a trial. Cole nodded, signaled for his deputy to take custody of the prisoner. As Marcus was dragged toward the jail, he turned to look at Eleanor one last time. "This is not over," he called. "Daniel loved you more than me. I need to know why. I need to know what you had that I did not." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "He did not love me," she said. "He used me, just like he used everyone, just like he used you." Marcus's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like a lost child instead of a vicious criminal. Then the jail door closed behind him. They stayed in Silver Creek for 3 days. Ruth Blackwood put them up at the boarding house. She clucked over Eleanor like a mother hen, fed them until they could not eat another bite, and steadfastly refused any payment. "You brought that monster to justice," she said. "That is payment enough." On the second day, Ruth pulled Jackson aside. "There is something you should know," she said. "Something about Daniel Moran." Jackson waited. Before his last job, Daniel stayed here one night. Ruth's weathered face was troubled. "He had a bag with him, heavy. He asked me to put it in the root cellar for safekeeping, said he would come back for it." Jackson felt the world tilt. "He never came back," Ruth continued. "After he was arrested, I looked in the bag. It was full of money, more money than I have ever seen. The 50,000. Daniel had hidden it here all along, right under everyone's noses." "Why did you not turn it in?" Jackson asked. "Turn it in to whom?" "The railroad men who would keep it for themselves. The politicians who would use it to buy votes. That money was stolen from thieves who stole it from working folks. I figured it could sit in my cellar until someone who deserved it came along. And Eleanor deserves it." Ruth smiled. "She survived 3 years of running from that animal. She married you, which shows questionable judgment. And she shot 2 of Marcus's men without flinching. I would say she has earned a fresh start." Jackson was silent for a long moment. "That money is cursed," he said finally. "It brought nothing but death and misery to everyone who touched it. Then use it to bring life." Ruth's eyes were sharp. "Rebuild your barn. Buy more cattle. Give that girl the home she deserves. It is not my decision to make." Number Ruth smiled. "I suppose it is not." That night, Jackson told Eleanor about the money. She sat in silence for a long time, her face unreadable. "Daniel hid it here," she said finally. "All this time, while I was running, while Marcus was hunting me. It was sitting in a boarding house cellar. Yes, $50,000. Yes." She laughed, a wild, broken sound. "He destroyed my life for nothing. I did not know where the money was. I could not have told Marcus if I wanted to, and the whole time it was here, right here, Eleanor." Jackson reached for her. She pulled away, stood and walked to the window. "I do not want it," she said. "That money is soaked in blood. Daniel killed people for it. Marcus killed people trying to find it. I will not build my life on that foundation." Jackson joined her at the window. Outside, the street was dark and quiet. Snow fell softly on the wooden buildings. "Then what do you want him to ask?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to face him. "I want to go home," she said, "back to the ranch. I want to rebuild what Marcus destroyed. I want to raise horses and cattle and maybe someday children. I want to wake up every morning next to you and go to sleep every night, knowing that I am finally safe." She took his hands. "I do not need $50,000 for that. I just need you." Jackson pulled her into his arms. "Then that is what you will have," he promised. "Everything else is just noise." They left Silver Creek on a clear, cold morning. The sky was blue as a robin's egg, and the snow sparkled like diamonds in the winter sun. Jackson drove the wagon while Eleanor sat beside him wrapped in buffalo robes. Silent Tom rode ahead, scouting the trail. His shoulder was healing well. The old man had survived worse wounds in his 60 years. Behind them, Silver Creek dwindled to a speck on the horizon, and with it, the ghosts of the past. What will happen to Marcus? Eleanor asked. Trial in Helena. Then probably hanging. His crimes are too numerous for mercy. She nodded slowly. I thought I would feel something. Relief. Satisfaction. But I just feel empty. Jackson reached over and took her hand. That is normal, he said. When you spend years running from something, the relief does not come all at once. It seeps in slowly. One day you will wake up and realize you have not thought about him in weeks. Is that how it was for you? After Maria? Jackson considered the question. It took a long time, he admitted. Years. But eventually the nightmares faded. The guilt became something I could carry instead of something that carried me. Do you still have nightmares? Sometimes. Less often now. He squeezed her hand. I think having you beside me helps. Eleanor smiled. The first real smile he had seen from her in days. I'm glad, she said. Glad I can help with something. They reached the ranch at sunset. The barn was gone, nothing left but a pile of charred timbers and ash. But the house still stood. The corrals were intact, and the horses that Jackson had saved from the fire grazed peacefully in the pasture. It could have been worse, Eleanor said. Much worse. They spent the evening cleaning up, sorting through what could be salvaged, making lists of what needed to be rebuilt. It was exhausting work, but there was something healing about it. Every board they moved, every nail they straightened, every plan they made for the future, all of it helped push the darkness back. That night they fell into bed too tired for anything but sleep. Eleanor curled against Jackson's side with her head on his chest. We should talk about the money, she murmured. I thought you did not want it. I do not. But that does not mean we should leave it sitting in Ruth's cellar forever. What do you suggest? Eleanor was quiet for a moment. There is a school in Silver Creek, she said. 1 teacher, 12 students, and barely enough money to keep the doors open. Go on. And there is a hospital that Doc Hendricks has been trying to build for years. The town needs it, but no one has the funds. Jackson understood. You want to give the money away. Not all of it. She propped herself up on one elbow. But enough to do some good. Enough to turn Daniel's blood money into something that helps people instead of hurting them. You're sure? No. Eleanor laughed softly. I am not sure of anything anymore. But I know I do not want that money in our lives, and I know there are people who need it more than we do. Jackson pulled her close. Then that is what we will do, he said. First thing in spring. Winter loosened its grip slowly. February brought a brief thaw. March brought mud and more snow. April brought rain, and the first green shoots pushing through the dead grass. Jackson and Eleanor worked side by side, rebuilding the barn. Silent Tom helped when his shoulder allowed, and neighbors that Jackson had barely known came from miles around to lend their strength. The community had heard about the fight with Marcus, about how Jackson and his mail-order bride had stood against a gang of outlaws and won. The story grew with each telling. By spring, Jackson Wade was practically a legend. He did not want the attention, did not want the admiring looks or the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room. But Eleanor seemed to thrive on it. She made friends with women who had once looked down on her. Organized quilting bees and barn raisings, became the center of a social network that Jackson barely understood. You are good at this, he told her one evening. The people stuff. Eleanor laughed. You make it sound like a disease. I just mean I never could figure out how to talk to folks. Make them like me. You do it naturally. Practice, she shrugged. When you spend 3 years pretending to be someone else, you learn to read people. Figure out what they want to hear. Is that what you do with me? Tell me what I want to hear. Eleanor looked at him seriously. Never, she said. You are the only person I have been completely honest with since Daniel died. Maybe the only person ever. She took his hand. That is why I love you, Jackson. Because I do not have to pretend. In May, they rode to Silver Creek with the money. Ruth had agreed to help distribute it. She knew the needs of the town better than anyone, knew which families were struggling, which businesses were failing, where every dollar could do the most good. $20,000 for the school, $20,000 for the hospital, $10,000 divided among families who had lost everything in the hard winter. It was not enough to solve all of Silver Creek's problems, but it was a start. The town held a celebration in Jackson and Eleanor's honor. A dance in the church hall with fiddle music and fresh lemonade and children running everywhere. Jackson stood against the wall watching Eleanor spin across the dance floor with one partner after another. She was laughing, glowing, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance. This was the woman he had married, not the frightened ghost who stepped off the stagecoach 6 months ago. This was Eleanor Moran Wade, fierce, stubborn, alive. You going to dance with your wife or just stand there gawking? Jackson turned. Ruth stood beside him with a knowing smile. I do not dance, he said. Everyone dances. They just need the right partner. Before he could protest, Ruth had pushed him onto the floor. Eleanor saw him coming and her face lit up. Finally, she said, I was starting to think you were made of stone. The music was slow, a waltz that Jackson vaguely recognized from some half-remembered dance lesson in his youth. He pulled Eleanor close and let his feet find the rhythm. You are full of surprises, she murmured against his shoulder. I could say the same about you. They danced, badly at first, then better as they found each other's rhythm. Around them, the townspeople smiled and whispered and raised their glasses in silent toasts. Thank you, Eleanor said quietly. For what? For everything. For saving me from Marcus, for rebuilding the ranch, for giving me a home. Jackson kissed her forehead. You saved yourself, he said. I just provided the location. She laughed. And the ammunition. That too. The music ended. They stood together in the middle of the floor, neither wanting to move. Take me home, Eleanor whispered. I have something to tell you. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Eleanor kept her secret despite Jackson's increasingly creative attempts to extract it. She just smiled mysteriously and told him to be patient. When they finally reached the house, she led him inside, sat him down by the fire, and took both his hands in hers. Jackson, she said, I am going to have a baby. The world stopped. Jackson stared at her, his mind blank, his heart racing. A baby, his baby, their baby. You are sure, he managed. Doc Hendricks confirmed it last week. I wanted to wait until after the celebration to tell you. How long? About 3 months along. The baby should come in the fall. Fall. Harvest season. When the leaves turned gold and the nights grew cold and new life prepared to face its first winter. Eleanor was watching him anxiously. Are you happy? She asked. I know we did not plan this. I know we have barely been married 6 months. But... Jackson kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, not a polite kiss. It was a kiss that said everything he could not put into words. Joy, terror, overwhelming love. I am happy, he said when they finally broke apart. Happier than I have ever been. Happier than I deserve to be. Eleanor laughed through tears. We deserve this, she said, both of us. After everything we have been through, we deserve happiness. Jackson pulled her onto his lap, held her close. What do you think, he asked? Boy or girl? I do not care, as long as they are healthy and stubborn and fierce. So a miniature version of you, Eleanor grinned. Would that be so bad? Jackson pretended to consider. I suppose I could handle 2 of you, he said. 3 might be pushing it. She hit him playfully on the shoulder, then kissed him again. Outside, the spring night was soft and warm. New life stirred in the pastures and the fields, and the woman in Jackson's arms. He thought about the year that had passed, the fear and the violence and the long dark nights, the ghosts he had carried, and the woman who had helped him lay them to rest. He had wanted a quiet wife. Instead, he got Eleanor, wild, fierce, completely his. It was the best mistake he had ever made. Summer came soft and golden to Montana. The grass grew tall in the pastures. The cattle fattened on rich forage. The horses that Eleanor bred gained reputations across 3 territories. And Eleanor's belly grew round with new life. She worked through the pregnancy with characteristic stubbornness, refused to slow down despite Jackson's increasingly desperate attempts to make her rest. "I am pregnant," she told him, "not dying. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I do not need to be wrapped in cotton wool. You need to be careful. I am being careful. I stopped breaking horses, did I not? Only because I hid the wild ones in the back pasture." Eleanor laughed, a sound that still made Jackson's heart skip after 6 months of hearing it. Their relationship had deepened over the summer. The passion was still there, hot and urgent and consuming. But there was more now. A comfortable intimacy, a shared language of glances and touches, the easy rhythm of two people who had stopped being strangers and started being family. Silent Tom watched the transformation with quiet approval. The old crow man had taken to carving wooden animals for the coming baby. Bears and horses and eagles that he left on the kitchen table without comment. Ruth visited whenever she could get away from the boarding house. She brought baby clothes and unsolicited advice and enough food to feed an army. "That girl needs to eat more," she declared after one visit. "She is carrying a Wade. Those babies come out big." "She is eating plenty," Jackson protested. "Not enough." Ruth pinched his arm. "And neither are you. Look at you. Skin and bones. I am the same weight I have been for 10 years, exactly my point." The trouble started in late July. A letter arrived from Helena, official government seal, addressed to Eleanor Wade. Jackson brought it to her where she sat on the porch shelling peas. She took one look at the seal and went pale. "Open it," Jackson said. "Whatever it is, we will face it together." Eleanor broke the seal with trembling fingers. "Read the contents, then read them again." "Marcus is dead," she said quietly. Jackson sat beside her, took the letter, read it himself. Hanged in Helena 2 weeks prior, the trial had been swift. The verdict unanimous. Daniel Moran's brother had paid for his crimes with his life. "How do you feel?" Jackson asked. Eleanor stared at the horizon. Her hands rested on her swollen belly. "I thought I would feel relieved," she said. "Free. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad." He was a monster. But he was also a man. A broken man who loved his brother too much and could not accept losing him. She turned to face Jackson. "That could have been you," she said. "If things had gone differently. If the violence had twisted you instead of Daniel, you could have become someone like Marcus." Jackson considered this. Considered all the choices he had made. All the deaths that stained his conscience. All the times he had stood at the crossroads between mercy and cruelty. Maybe he admitted, but I did not. Why not? I do not know. Maybe luck, maybe grace, maybe just stubbornness. Eleanor smiled slightly. "I think it was more than that," she said. "I think somewhere inside you there was always a man who wanted to build instead of destroy. You just needed a reason to let him out. And you gave me that reason. We gave each other a reason." They sat together in silence as the sun set over the mountains. The letter lay forgotten on the porch. Marcus Moran was dead. The past was finally buried. Now there was only the future. August brought heat and thunderstorms. Lightning struck the new barn one night. Jackson and Tom fought the fire for 3 hours before bringing it under control. They lost some hay but saved the structure. Eleanor watched from the porch, forbidden from helping by Jackson's increasingly frantic commands. Her belly was too large now for strenuous work. Even she had to admit it. When the fire was out, Jackson staggered over to her, covered in soot and sweat and smelling of smoke. "You should have gone inside," he said, "and miss all the excitement." He collapsed into the chair beside her. "I am getting too old for this," he muttered. "You are 34, like I said. Too old." Eleanor laughed and handed him a cup of water. He drank it in one long swallow. "The baby kicked," she said. Jackson's hand went to her belly, felt the movement under the stretched skin. "Strong," he said, "takes after their father. God help us if they take after their mother." Eleanor hit him. Jackson caught her hand and pulled her close. They sat tangled together as the last embers of the fire died. and the stars came out one by one. September arrived with cool nights and golden days. The baby was due any time. Eleanor moved slowly now, her feet swollen, her back aching, her temper short. Jackson walked on eggshells, tried to anticipate her every need, usually failed. "I do not need you hovering," she snapped one morning. "I need you to stop treating me like an invalid." "I am not hovering. You are absolutely hovering. You have been hovering for 2 months. If you do not stop, I am going to shoot you." Jackson retreated to the barn, stayed there until Silent Tom came to fetch him for dinner. "She did not mean it," Tom signed. "I know. Women get strange near the end. My mother threw a skillet at my father when she was carrying me. Did it hit him? Broke his nose?" Tom's eyes crinkled with rare humor. "They were married 40 years after that." Jackson laughed despite himself. That evening, Eleanor apologized. They held each other in the darkness and talked about their fears. "What if something goes wrong?" she whispered. "What if the baby does not survive? What if I do not survive? Nothing is going to go wrong. You do not know that." Number Jackson stroked her hair. "But I know that whatever happens, we will face it together. That is all we can do." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Promise me something. Anything. If something happens to me, take care of our child. Do not let grief consume you. Do not become someone dark and broken." Jackson held her tighter. "I promise," he said. "But nothing is going to happen. You are the strongest person I know. You have survived things that would destroy anyone else. You are going to survive this too. From your lips to God's ears." The baby came on a night of howling wind. Jackson woke to Eleanor's hand gripping his arm. Her face was pale and sweating. Her breath came in short gasps. "It is time," she said. Jackson was on his feet before the words finished leaving her mouth. He had prepared for this moment, had supplies ready, had sent word to Ruth 2 weeks ago asking her to come stay. But Ruth was not here. The weather had turned ugly and the roads were impassable. They were alone. Eleanor screamed as another contraction hit. Jackson helped her to the bed, propped pillows behind her back. "I need to get Doc Hendricks," he said. "No time." Eleanor grabbed his hand. "The baby is coming now." Jackson had delivered calves, foals, even a human baby once during his bounty hunting days when he stumbled across a woman in labor in the middle of nowhere. But this was different. This was Eleanor. This was his child. "Tell me what to do," he said. She walked him through it, between contractions, between screams, with a calm that he could not match. Hours passed, the wind howled outside, the fire crackled in the hearth, and slowly, impossibly, a new life fought its way into the world. "It is a girl," Eleanor gasped when the final push brought their daughter into Jackson's waiting hands. The baby was small and red and angry. She let out a wail that drowned out the storm outside. "She is beautiful," Jackson breathed. He cleaned her gently, wrapped her in the blanket Ruth had made, placed her in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked down at their daughter with an expression Jackson had never seen before. Wonder and exhaustion and fierce protective love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Jackson sat on the edge of the bed, put his arm around his wife, looked at the tiny face that somehow combined features from both of them. "What should we call her?" Eleanor asked. Jackson thought about it. Thought about everything they had been through. The fear and the violence and the long journey to this moment. "Hope," he said finally. "We should call her Hope." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "Hope Wade," she said. "I like it." The baby stopped crying, opened her eyes. Green as spring grass after rain. "She has your eyes," Jackson said. "And your stubborn chin." Eleanor laughed weakly. "God help us all." Dawn came soft and gray. The storm had passed. The world outside was clean and white and silent. Jackson sat by the window holding his daughter while Eleanor slept. Hope was awake, staring up at him with those impossible green eyes. "I am going to make mistakes," he told her quietly. "I am going to get things wrong. I have been getting things wrong my whole life." Hope blinked, reached for his finger with a tiny hand. "But I'm going to try," Jackson continued. "Every day, to be the father you deserve, to keep you safe and loved and free." He kissed her forehead. "Your mother is the bravest person I have ever met. She survived things that would break most people. And she did it alone." Hope made a small sound, almost like agreement. "You will not have to be alone," Jackson promised. "Neither of you. Not ever again." Eleanor stirred, opened her eyes, saw them together by the window. "Bring her here," she said softly. "I want to hold her." Jackson carried Hope to the bed, placed her carefully in Eleanor's arms, then climbed in beside them. The three of them lay together as the morning light grew stronger. A family. Improbable and broken and beautiful. "I wanted a quiet wife," Jackson murmured. Eleanor smiled. "And I wanted to disappear. Neither of us got what we wanted." "No." Jackson kissed her hair. "We got something better. 5 years later." The morning sun painted the Montana sky in shades of rose and gold. Jackson Wade stood on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up. The ranch had grown. A second barn, expanded corrals, a herd of cattle that numbered in the hundreds, and the horses. Eleanor's horses were famous now. Buyers came from as far as California to bid on her stock. "Papa." Jackson turned. Hope stood in the doorway, 5 years old with her mother's green eyes and his dark hair, already too smart for her own good. "Good morning, sunshine. Mama says breakfast is ready. Tell her I'm coming." Hope vanished back inside. Jackson heard her small feet running across the wooden floor, heard Eleanor's voice gentle and warm, heard his daughter's laugh. 5 years. Sometimes it felt like forever. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. He thought about the man he had been, the bounty hunter with blood on his hands and ghosts in his eyes. The broken man who sent away for a quiet wife, hoping she could save him. Instead, he got Eleanor, wild and fierce and nothing like what he expected. She had not saved him. She had challenged him, pushed him, refused to let him hide from his past. And somewhere in that pushing, he had found the strength to save himself. Jackson. He turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, her apron was dusted with flour, and her belly rounded with their second child. "Coffee is getting cold," she said. He crossed to her, pulled her close, kissed her the way he had kissed her 1,000 times before, the way he would kiss her 1,000 times again. "I love you," he said. "I know." Eleanor smiled against his lips. "Now come eat before your daughter devours everything." They went inside together. Hope was already at the table, stuffing her face with biscuits and chattering about horses and the new foal she wanted to name Diablo Jr. "Absolutely not," Eleanor said. "One Diablo is enough for any ranch." "But Mama." "No. And that is final." Hope pouted, then brightened. "What about Hope Jr.?" Jackson choked on his coffee. Eleanor laughed so hard she had to sit down. "We are not naming a horse after you," Eleanor said when she could breathe again. "Why not?" "Because you are not a horse." Hope considered this logic, found it wanting. "I could be a horse," she said seriously, "if I practiced." Jackson pulled his daughter onto his lap. She was getting too big for such things, but she did not seem to care, and neither did he. "You cannot be a horse," he told her. "Horses do not eat biscuits. This one would. Horses do not sleep in beds. This one would. Horses do not give their papas hugs." Hope wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezed tight. "This one does." Jackson held her close, breathed in the smell of her hair, childhood and sunshine and everything good in the world. Over her head, he met Eleanor's eyes. She was watching them with an expression he had come to know well. Love, contentment, the quiet joy of a woman who had finally found home. Later that morning, they rode out together to check the herd. Eleanor on Rosalind, who was old now but still spirited. Jackson on Caesar's son, who had inherited his father's steady temperament. Hope on a gentle mare named Buttercup, who was infinitely patient with small riders. Silent Tom joined them at the pasture gate. The old crowman was gray now, moving slower than he used to, but his eyes were still sharp and his loyalty still absolute. "How are they looking?" Jackson asked. Tom signed his reply. "Fat and happy, ready for market." "We will drive them to Helena next month," Eleanor said. "Get better prices than the local buyers. You should stay home," Jackson told her. The baby. The baby is not coming for 3 months." Eleanor gave him a look he knew too well. "And I am not missing the drive. I have been planning this for a year." Jackson knew better than to argue. They spent the morning riding the boundaries, checking fences, counting heads. Hope chattered constantly, questions about everything she saw. Why were the mountains white? Why did cows eat grass? Why did Papa have a scar on his face? That last question made Jackson pause. "I got in a fight," he said carefully. "A long time ago. Did you win?" "Yes." "Good." Hope nodded with satisfaction. "I would win too." Eleanor caught Jackson's eye, smiled slightly. This one was going to be trouble. They both knew it, and neither of them would have it any other way. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun went down. Hope had been put to bed after the usual negotiations. 2 stories, 1 song, 1 glass of water, 1 last hug. Eleanor leaned against Jackson's shoulder. Her hand rested on her belly where their son or daughter grew. "Happy?" she asked quietly. Jackson thought about the question. Thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. The violence and the bloodshed. The woman he killed by accident and the men he killed on purpose. The years of running from his own shadow. The desperate gamble of a mail-order bride. And Eleanor. Always Eleanor. Walking into his life like a thunderstorm and refusing to leave. "Yes," he said finally. "I am happy." "Good." Eleanor snuggled closer. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. The same stars that had shone on all their struggles, all their victories, all the long nights when they held each other and wondered if morning would come. Morning always came. Jackson Wade had wanted a quiet wife. Instead, he got Eleanor. Wild and fierce and completely his. And every dawn she reminded him that the best things in life were the ones you never expected. The Montana night stretched endlessly around them, full of promise, full of peace. And in his arms his wild wife laughed as the rising moon turned the world to silver. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.